during his presidency. The Joint Hague Declaration, the Joint Agreement on Safety and Immunity Guarantees, and the finishing of the Comprehensive Agreement on Respect for Human Rights and International Humanitarian Law. But this agreement, that's the CARIL, was not signed by the principal, because the principal has to sign. If it's a major agreement, that was also an agreement, it has to be signed and approved by the principals of both the GRP or GPH and the NDF. But the CARIL was not signed by Ramos, although many thought he would sign it. And surprisingly, that was the achievement of Joseph Estrada. He signed the CARIL. Of course, we hear stories. Now, when he was thanked for signing it, he said, I signed so many things I didn't know what I signed. But anyway, he signed it. Now, GMA also had an achievement. Kasi in the CARIL, if you read it, I noticed that you have the books there on the agreement, major agreements. No, the green one. If you look at the green book and you read the CARIL, the last part says that there should be a joint monitoring committee to oversee the implementation of CARIL. And this was not done from CARIL was signed in 1998, and nothing was done about putting forward or setting up the mechanism, the Joint Monitoring Committee, to start monitoring the implementation of CARIL. Now another surprise, it was during the time of GMA, when she agreed that, kasi kami, we kept insisting, we should set up the JMC, that Joint Monitoring Committee, because we could see human rights were being violated right and left. And we need a system to monitor and to see what can be done about it. And at the start of her career in 2002, GMA approved the setting up of the Joint Monitoring Committee. And the Royal Norwegian government immediately agreed to fund the joint secretaries of both the GPH, at that time known as the GRP, and the NDF. And that's why I don't know if many of you know that there is the Joint Secretariat in Lantana, in Cubao, on the 6th floor of the multipurpose building, I think it's called, where on one side you have the Secretariat of the GPH and on the other side the NDF. And if you have complaints on violations of CARIL, you go there and you submit your complaint. And this has been functioning since 2002, which is very good. Which brings me to my topic on the Joint Monitoring Committee. If you read again the CARIL, you will see that the members of the Joint Monitoring Committee are 3 members on the NDF side, 3 members on the GPH. On the NDF side, we have Fidel Agawili as our chair. I'm a member, and Danilo Borjal is the 3rd person in the Joint Monitoring Committee of the NDF. Right now, the chair of the GPH is Chito Gaston, and he has 2 other members. The purpose, we're supposed to meet every 3 months to look at the complaints that have come in and to make decisions. We just can make, we can just receive complaints, we can make investigations, but we have no powers beyond that. And that's been agreed on both sides. But, shortly after the JMC was set up, when 2002, Aguinaldo, 2001, and then the JMC was set up.
The JMC was set up 2004.
But that was the time. Yeah. Okay, I did, sir. Tanda na kasi. Anyway, when the talks were suspended, GMA and the peace panel of the GPH side refused to have the Joint Monitoring Committee meet. in the meantime, the Secretariat was working, so people were submitting their complaints. And there are forms. If you go up to the sixth floor, and if you have a complaint, for example, against the NDF, then you can submit it. There is a receptionist for the NDF. There's also a receptionist for the GPH. The NDF, if your complaint is against the NDF, they will receive the complaint. They will study it, they photocopy it, and give a copy to the GPH side. So both secretariats, the GPH and NDF, have copies of all complaints submitted. And let me tell you that I have 1.5 aparador full of papers of complaints. 1 aparador of the GPH complaints lang. And I'm afraid that aparador will collapse because paper is so heavy. And half an aparador of complaints against the NDF. However, in the NDF, a lot of it are what we call nuisance complaints. Because they just fill in the form, they don't even fill in the form, sometimes signature lang. But it has to be received because it has to have a number. Or else it's against, for example, there was an encounter. So they will file a complaint against the NDF for having an encounter. But we have a civil war, an encounter in international humanitarian law, those are legitimate targets. So those are not valid complaints. But what we do is, in the NDF, we have, even if the Joint Monitoring Committee was not functioning, we would have meetings twice a year, at least twice a year, to look at all the complaints filed against the NDF. We study all the complaints. We study the complaint, the evidences, the witnesses, and in many cases we say we have to investigate this further, or we have to make an analysis. Do we have to investigate this further? Do we have to say this is not a valid complaint? Do we say this is a legitimate target? We make the categories. Now, when the talks resumed in February, the Joint Monitoring Committee met again, so it was good. We started to work again. One of the important unfinished documents of the Joint Monitoring Committee was the supplemental guidelines to guide our work. Because sometimes they will say, oh, this is a complaint against Karil. This happened in 1982. We say, oh, it's not Karil. How can you violate a document that did not yet exist? No? So you have to have guidelines, you have to have rules to follow. Now, we started this in 2004, and this was suspended while the peace talks were suspended. Last March, we had a meeting here, and the Joint Monitoring Committee, both of the GPH and NDF, we were able to complete the supplemental guidelines. So this is for implementation. But it needs the approval of the panels, of both panels. Because we don't have the authority to say, okay, these are our rules, we implement it. No, we are under the panels, so the panels have to approve these rules. But again now, there are still no talks. So nakabitin ulit itong supplemental guidelines. So that's where we are now. But we have looked at all the complaints against the NDF and made judgments whether we continue the investigation or what. Now, we have had some cases where they filed complaints, and this is the particular case, for example, of Sotero Llamas. There is a case filed against the NDF. Ang NDF daw ang pumatay kay Sotero Llamas. Another complaint, ang GPH daw ang pumatay kay Sotero Llamas. So, what's the answer to this? A joint investigation or an investigation. Sino ba talaga? So, this we still have to implement. But again now, no talks, so we don't know where we are. The supplementary guidelines are not yet approved. Bitin kami, as usual. So, you see the importance also of having the panels meeting and talking. Not only deciding, which are very important issues, the socio-economic, the agreement on socio-economic reforms, but also even to allow, like the Joint Monitoring Committee, to continue its functions. And that's all on the Joint Monitoring Committee. What I'd like to point out is these days when we are here, we've been able to talk to several people, we've been able to express our views. And what I'm beginning to realize is talagang the divergent views. If you talk to someone from the GPH, parang sometimes they say it, most of the time they don't. But actually what they say, what they want is surrender. Mag-surrender na kayo, tapos you will have peace. As if peace, as if there's no peace because there's an NPA. Whereas, why did the NPA start? Because there was injustice in the first place. There was the exploitation of people. There was militarization to protect the interests of the big companies. No? So, but for them, peace is actually surrender. Sometimes they say, most of the time they don't, but read between the lines. For the NDF, for us, we work, we struggle for peace because we want to address the root causes of the armed conflict. In other words, we want to address the injustices. We want to address, parang, bakit pa tayo naghihirap? Why is there, in such a naturally rich country, why is there so much poverty? No? It's because, where does the wealth of our country go? I think we all know the answer to that. Nasa na ba? Who controls our economy? The multinationals. We are subservient, we don't have our independence. We are subservient to the policies and the demands and the saying kung ano gusto ng multinationals. Etc. Alam naman ninyo yung kwento niya. No? Pero for us, real peace will come when every peasant will have some piece of land to till. When our industries will be for our own good. When we will have industries where we can mobilize and get our natural resources and bring back the wealth into the country. That's the peace we're fighting for. That's the peace addressing the root causes. That's what we need. So I can see that in our waging for peace, there are very divergent views. And that's why it's very difficult. But it doesn't make me give up, because if we give up, wala na. So we continue struggling, working for peace. That's all. Thank you.